I should have left the moment the doors shut behind me. The sound was too final, like the snap of a coffin lid. The air inside was wrong, damp, heavy, thick with the smell of seawater and mildew, though the nearest shoreline was 10 miles away. My boots sank slightly into the carpet, each step releasing a faint squish, cold moisture seeping up through the fabric. I swept my flashlight across the space. The grand chandeliers hung overhead, their crystals coated in dust, some dangling loose like broken teeth. Shadows clung to the corners as if afraid of the light. The beam landed on the reception desk. Unlike the rest of the room, the brass counter gleamed, polished as if someone had wiped it down minutes ago. Resting on it was a guest ledger, open, yellowed with age. The last name written was mine, same handwriting, same looping signature. The date, today. My pulse spiked. I hadn't signed anything. I hadn't told anyone I was coming here. A cheerful bell chimed from deeper inside the building, bright and out of place. "Welcome back," the voice said. It came from nowhere and everywhere, inside my ears, under my skin. My flashlight flickered, and for a fraction of a second the lobby was full. Guests in shimmering gowns, men in dark suits, champagne glasses raised in mid-laughter. The air was warm, perfumed with flowers and tobacco. Then darkness, silence, empty space. A slow, deliberate creak came from above. Footsteps began to descend the grand staircase, each one echoing through the lobby. I wanted to run. My body refused. The air felt thicker now, like the whole building was inhaling, waiting. The footsteps stopped halfway down, and then something smiled. I didn't see its face, only the outline. A tall shape, draped in darkness so complete it seemed to drink in my flashlight beam. The air between us vibrated faintly, as if the building's silence was alive and humming. I could swear I heard breathing, slow and deliberate, but it didn't match my own rhythm. "Can I help you?" I tried to sound casual, but my voice cracked halfway through. The figure didn't answer. Instead, it shifted one step lower, the creak of the stair echoing through the vast lobby. My gut twisted. Something about its movements was off. Too smooth, too careful, like it was mimicking how people move rather than knowing it. I took one involuntary step backward. My heel landed in a cold puddle. I glanced down. Water was pooling across the carpet, rippling outward from the staircase like something had been dragged up from a lake. When I looked back, the figure was gone. A distant door slammed. The chandelier above trembled. Dust drifted in lazy spirals through my flashlight beam. I turned toward the exit. The brass double doors stood only 20 feet away. I sprinted. My fingers closed around the handle, ice cold. I yanked, locked. A whisper brushed my ear, close enough to stir my hair. "Checking out already?" I spun, light flashing across empty space. My heartbeat roared in my ears. The smell of seawater was stronger now, briny and sour, like rotting kelp. From the reception desk, the bell chimed again. Once, twice, 3 times. I swallowed hard. "All right," I muttered to no one. "Let's see what's upstairs." The staircase seemed to wait for me, the shadows curling along its edges like bait. And I climbed. The stairs groaned beneath my weight, a tired, hollow sound swallowed by the oppressive silence. Each step felt like descending deeper into the belly of something alive, something waiting. The stale air grew colder, thickening as I ascended, smelling faintly of rust and old wood. At the landing, a long hallway stretched before me, walls peeling with faded wallpaper cracked like dried skin. Dim moonlight filtered through grimy windows, casting fractured shadows that danced just beyond my flashlight's reach. The scent shifted, now a faint hint of tobacco and something metallic, coppery, like blood. My footsteps echoed unnervingly. Somewhere, far off, a door creaked open, then shut with a soft thud. I froze. Silence returned, but it was not peaceful. It pressed on me like a weight. Whispers slithered around me, indistinct and fragmented. Not words, fragments of sound, like voices just out of comprehension, hovering at the edge of hearing. Goosebumps rose on my arms. I strained to listen, heart pounding like a drum. Suddenly, a draft brushed past, cold and sharp, carrying with it a faint, sour smell. Sweat, fear, decay. The wallpaper trembled as if breathing. I felt a presence nearby, unseen but unmistakably close. My breath hitched. A faint clicking echoed down the hall. My flashlight caught something. A figure at the end of the corridor, back turned, motionless. The outline flickered, wavering like smoke in the light. I called out, voice barely a whisper. "Hello?" No reply. The figure slowly turned. No face, just a black void where eyes should be. A soft, chilling chuckle echoed, vibrating through the floorboards. Panic surged. I stumbled backward, heart racing. The hallway behind me seemed to stretch endlessly. I was not alone. And whatever was here was waiting. My breath caught as the faceless figure stood motionless, a black void where a face should be. The air grew colder, each breath frosty and sharp, biting my lungs. My flashlight flickered, threatening to die. Panic clawed at me, but my legs refused to move. The figure's head tilted slightly, as if curious or amused. Then it stepped forward, its footsteps silent on the cracked wooden floor. A faint metallic scent accompanied it, sharp and bitter, like blood mixed with rust. I stumbled back, heart pounding so loudly I feared it would burst through my chest. The corridor seemed to warp, walls bending inward as shadows deepened. My mind screamed to run, but my body felt frozen, trapped in an invisible web. What are you?" I managed to whisper. The figure didn't answer. Instead, it raised a pale hand, translucent and trembling, pointing toward a nearby door partially open. Behind it, flickering candlelight spilled out, casting long, grotesque shadows. Against my better judgment, I moved toward the door, curiosity mixed with dread. The candlelight illuminated peeling wallpaper stained dark with age. The scent of decay and burnt wood filled the room. A table sat in the center, cluttered with old photographs and yellowed letters. One photo caught my eye, a group of people smiling, dressed in vintage clothes. But in the center stood a man whose face was scratched out, replaced by the same black void as the figure before me. A sudden cold breeze slammed the door shut behind me. I whirled around, flashlight flickering wildly. The figure's voice echoed softly around the room, a whisper dripping with malice. "You belong here now." My pulse thundered. The walls seemed to close in. I was no longer a visitor. I was the guest. The door slammed shut with a finality that crushed my chest. I yanked the handle. Locked. Panic surged. The flickering candlelight cast wild shadows that danced like specters across the peeling wallpaper. The stale air tasted thick, sour, and unbearable. I scanned the room desperately, heart hammering. The table with the photographs and letters sat like a silent witness, but something else caught my eye. A cracked mirror hanging crooked on the far wall. Its glass was dull and cloudy, but as I stepped closer, I saw my reflection. Or something that wasn't me. My eyes stared back, wide and terrified, but behind me, in the mirror's depths, a shadow moved independently, twisting, writhing, a mass of darkness that pulsed and throbbed like a living wound. I spun around, nothing there. My breath caught, and I stumbled back to the table, fingers trembling as I rifled through the letters. The handwriting was spidery and frantic, recounting strange disappearances, whispers behind locked doors, and shadows that consumed. A sudden whisper tickled my ear, soft, urgent. "Find the mark." I whipped around, empty. The candle flickered violently as if struggling against an unseen wind. The temperature plunged further. I could see my breath misting. The air smelled of decay and wet earth, like a freshly disturbed grave. My skin prickled, senses on high alert. Then the floor groaned beneath me. The walls seemed to pulse, breathing with the rhythm of some monstrous heartbeat. A low growl rumbled from the shadows, close, deep, inhuman, trapped, alone, and the resort was awakening around me. I had no eye, find the mark. The words echoed in my mind like a curse, taunting and impossible to ignore. I needed answers, or at least a way out. I searched the table again, tracing the faded ink on the letters. One mentioned a symbol, a circle crossed by a jagged line that residents called the mark. And it was said to appear where the resort's darkness was strongest, a gateway, a trap, or maybe a warning. The flickering candlelight revealed faint scratches on the wooden floor, arranged in an almost perfect circle. I traced the jagged line with my trembling finger. The wood felt cold beneath my touch, colder than ice, almost alive. Suddenly, the room seemed to shift. The walls breathed, closing in. The candle guttered, shadows stretching and twisting. The stale air grew heavier, pressing against my chest. My heartbeat thundered like a war drum. Footsteps echoed outside the door, slow, methodical, impossible to ignore. I pressed my back to the wall, breath shallow. A key rattled in the lock, the sound sharp and cruel. The door creaked open, empty hallway beyond, silent except for the faint, distant melody of a piano, haunting and discordant. The scent of salt water mingled with decaying flowers. I stepped out cautiously, every nerve screaming. The corridor stretched endlessly, walls warped and stained, the faded wallpaper pulsing with shadows. Ahead, a faded symbol glowed faintly on the far wall. The mark, the circle with the jagged line. It pulsed softly, beckoning me closer, promising answers or doom. My hand reached out, fingers trembling as they brushed the cold paint. A whisper erupted all around me. "Welcome home." I stumbled back, heart in my throat. Something wasn't right, and it was watching. What the mark meant, or if I even wanted to find it. But staying here was no longer an option. The mark glowed faintly on the wall, pulsing like a heartbeat in the dim corridor. My fingers brushed the cold paint, and a shiver raced up my spine. The air thickened, heavy with a scent of salt and decay. Behind me, the door slammed shut, echoing down the endless hallway. Panic welled in my chest. I was trapped. The corridor stretched before me like a labyrinth. The faded wallpaper curled at the edges, revealing rotting wood beneath. Shadows flickered in the corners, moving just out of sight. My flashlight flickered again, threatening to fail. A low humming began, soft at first, then growing louder, reverberating through the walls and floor. The light warped, bending around corners like it was alive. I took a tentative step forward, heart pounding. The hum pulsed in time with my breath, dragging me deeper into the twisting corridor. Doors lined the hallway, some ajar, others nailed shut. From behind one, muffled voices whispered, desperate and pleading. Another emitted the faint sound of children laughing, cold, distant, and wrong. I tried one door. It creaked open to reveal a room frozen in time. Dusty furniture draped in white sheets, a broken clock stuck at midnight. A portrait hung crooked on the wall. A smiling family, faces warped and blurred. I backed away, heart racing. The laughter echoed again, closer now, circling me like a predator. Suddenly, the hallway twisted sharply, disorienting me. I spun around. The corridor stretched endlessly in every direction. The exit vanished. A cold breath grazed my neck. I swallowed hard. You can't leave. I wasn't alone, and this place was alive. Hungry. The words lingered in my ears. You can't leave. My breath hitched as a cold breeze swept down the corridor, carrying with it faint whispers, unintelligible but urgent. They seeped from the cracked walls, curling around me like smoke, their voices a chore, us of lost souls. I pressed my hands against the peeling wallpaper, feeling the rough, brittle surface beneath my fingertips. The walls seemed to pulse, a subtle vibration humming through the wood and plaster, alive with something unseen. Whispers grew louder, overlapping in a chaotic symphony. Names, my name, called out in desperate tones, pleas for help, warnings I couldn't quite grasp. Shadows shifted, thickening at the edges of my vision. Flickers of movement teased the corners, shapes indistinct but human, or almost human. The air grew heavier, damp with the scent of earth and rot, and something sour, metallic. My skin prickled as if insects crawled beneath it. Suddenly, the floor beneath me vibrated sharply. A crack snaked across the floorboards, widening like a jagged scar. I stumbled back, heart pounding. The crack split open, revealing a dark abyss beneath, swallowing light and sound. From that darkness, a cold hand shot up, fingers gnarled and wet, grasping blindly. I recoiled, stumbling away as more hands emerged, grasping for anything to drag down. Panic surged. I ran, pounding down the corridor, whispers chasing, growing louder, pleading, threatening. Behind me, the walls groaned and shifted, closing in, narrowing the path like a living maze. Breathless, I burst through a door into a small room, empty but for a single wooden chair. On it rested a faded photograph. The faces were blurred, except one. A man with eyes like black voids stared back at me. The whispering followed. You belong here. And I knew this place was claiming me. The photograph felt impossibly heavy in my hands, as if it held the weight of every soul trapped in this place. I stared into the man's black void eyes, feeling them pull at me, drawing me deeper into the darkness. His expression was calm, too calm, like he was waiting. I looked up from the photo. The room was still, silent, but the whispering voices from the corridor had followed me in, softer now, more insistent. They pressed against my mind, tugging at memories that weren't mine, memories of laughter turned to screams, of faces twisted in terror. A sudden chill swept through the room. The air smelled of damp earth and old paper. My skin prickled with dread. The chair beneath me creaked, as if the building itself was breathing. I set the photo down on the dusty floor and moved to the door, desperate to escape this suffocating stillness. It wouldn't budge. Frustrated, I turned back and noticed a faint glimmer in the photograph's corner. A symbol, faint but unmistakable. The mark. The same jagged circle I'd seen on the wall downstairs. My heart hammered. Was this man connected to the resort's darkness? Was he a prisoner, a guardian, or something worse? Suddenly, a low rumble shook the room. The walls groaned, plaster crumbling in clouds of dust. The shadows stretched, pooling around the corners like ink spilling on a page. The photograph's image began to shift. The man's face warped, twisting into a grotesque mask of pain and rage. His black eyes burned bright, flames licking from their depths. I dropped the photo, stumbling back as a piercing scream echoed through the building, shattering the silence. The resort was alive, and it was angry. The scream ripped through the silence like a jagged blade, vibrating in my chest and rattling the very walls. The plaster cracked and peeled, dust raining down as if the resort itself was tearing open in pain. My breath awed in my throat, heart pounding with raw terror. I stumbled backward, tripping over broken floorboards, the echo of the scream lingering in my ears like a curse. The air grew thick and suffocating, smelling of smoke and wet earth, stifling and foul. The whispering voices returned, louder now, a chaotic chorus of agony and despair. Suddenly, the walls began to bleed. Dark, thick liquid oozed from the cracks, sticky and warm. It pooled at my feet, spreading like a shadow eating the floor. The smell grew sharper, coppery and metallic, unmistakably blood. I forced myself to move, pushing past the nausea and fear, following the corridor that twisted and bent like a living thing. The blood dripped from the walls in slow, rhythmic pulses, as if the building had a heartbeat. Ahead, a door stood open, faint light spilling through. I rushed toward it, desperate for refuge, but the light flickered, revealing a room frozen in darkness, heavy with shadows. Inside, a piano sat in the corner, keys yellowed and cracked. Suddenly, the discordant melody I'd heard earlier began again, played by unseen hands. Each note was sharp, piercing, and filled with sorrow. I backed away, heart hammering. The walls groaned, whispers turning into screams. The blood surged, creeping faster, the scent thick and choking. I realized then, this place was alive, and it hated me. There was no escape, only the screaming. The discordant piano melody haunted the air, each note jagged and uneven, played by fingers I couldn't see. The haunting tune clawed at my nerves, fraying the edges of my sanity. The room was thick with shadows, swallowing the faint light that bled in from the hallway. I stepped closer to the piano, hands trembling, my breath shallow. The keys moved on their own, pressing down slowly, methodically, as if guided by some invisible force. The smell of burnt wood and mildew filled the air, choking and suffocating. A sudden cold draft swept past me, carrying whispers that felt like icy fingers trailing down my spine. The voices were urgent, pleading, but I couldn't understand the words. They were broken, disjointed, a tangle of cries and warnings. I shone my flashlight toward the dark corners of the room. The beam caught a glimpse of something, a figure, crouched low, watching me with eyes that gleamed faintly like embers. It vanished the moment I blinked, leaving only the echo of its breath in the stale air. The piano keys continued their mournful song, now faster, more frantic. My heart raced. Something in the room was alive, watching, waiting. I turned to leave, but the door slammed shut with a thunderous bang. The piano stuttered, the melody warping into a harsh, discordant scream. The walls trembled, the shadows thickened, pressing inward like a suffocating tide. The figure reappeared, closer this time, its face still hidden, but its presence undeniable. It reached toward me with a trembling hand, fingers long and pale. I stumbled backward, barely able to breathe. This place wasn't just haunted, it was hungry. The figure's trembling hand reached out, fingers curling like dry branches. My breath hitched, every instinct screaming to flee, but my legs felt rooted, as if the floor had grown sticky, holding me in place. The piano's mournful melody warped into a low growl, vibrating through the walls and floorboards. Shadows crept along the edges of the room, thick and viscous like smoke that suffocated rather than floated. The air tasted metallic, sharp and thick with menace. The figure's presence pressed closer, its breath cold against my skin. A faint, rancid scent of rot and wet earth drifted from it, the scent of death lurking just beneath the surface. My pulse thundered in my ears. Suddenly, the room's darkness pulsed and shifted. Shapes emerged, twisting and writhing, clawing at the edges of my vision. Faces, grotesque and contorted, pressed out from the walls, mouths open in silent screams. Their eyes locked onto me with a desperate hunger. A cold voice whispered in my mind, not spoken aloud but felt, dripping with malice. "You're ours now. The hunger demands." Panic flooded my senses. I tore my gaze from the wall, seeking escape. The door slammed again, trapping me inside this nightmare. My flashlight flickered violently before dying, plunging me into blackness. The piano's growl morphed into a guttural roar as unseen hands grabbed at me, cold and relentless. I screamed, struggling against the invisible grasp, but the hunger pulled me deeper into the darkness. The walls closed in, swallowing light and hope. I was no longer an explorer. I was prey, and the resort's appetite was endless. Darkness swallowed me whole, a suffocating blackness that crushed every breath. I thrashed wildly, desperate to break free, but invisible hands gripped tighter, dragging me deeper into the void. The haunting growl of the piano faded into distant echoes, replaced by sinister whispers slithering through my mind like venomous snakes. Cold fingers brushed my skin, icy, sharp, and relentless. I gasped, clawing blindly at the darkness. My hands found something rough and jagged, walls, or something else, alive and breathing. The space around me warped and twisted, shifting like a nightmare made flesh. Then, faint light flickered ahead, a trembling glow like a candle fighting a storm. I crawled toward it, limbs heavy and trembling, heart hammering. As I approached, shadows thinned to reveal a narrow corridor lined with cracked mirrors. My reflection stared back, pale, haunted, eyes wide with terror. But behind my reflection, something lurked in each mirror. Dark shapes with glowing red eyes, snarling and shifting in silent rage, trapped in glass prisons. They reached out with clawed hands, pounding against the mirrored surface, desperate to break free. A cold, mocking voice echoed from behind me. "You see them now, but you'll never leave." I spun around. The hallway stretched endlessly, walls pulsing with sickly green light. The air reeked of decay and sulfur, thick and suffocating. Panic surged. Frantically, I searched for an exit, but the corridor twisted into a labyrinth with no escape. Mirrors multiplied surrounding me, reflecting countless distorted versions of myself, each more broken and hollow. The shadows pressed closer, whispers rising into a deafening roar. Trapped in their endless gaze, I understood this resort didn't just consume bodies. It fed on souls. The corridor twisted and folded around me like a living thing, endless and cruel. I tried to run, but very turn led me back to the same cracked mirrors, each reflecting my pale, terrified face. The distorted reflections seemed to mock me, their eyes darker, faces more hollow than mine. The air grew colder, thick with the scent of rot and something metallic, iron, like old blood. My breath formed clouds in front of me as I stumbled forward, heartbeat hammering like a warning drum. The walls pulsed rhythmically, as if the resort itself was alive, breathing alongside me. Voices whispered from every direction, desperate, angry, pleading. Some spoke my name, others cried out in pain or warning. I pressed my hands against the nearest mirror, its surface icy cold. The glass rippled like water beneath my fingers. Suddenly, a face appeared in the mirror that wasn't mine. A woman's, pale and spectral, eyes wide with terror. She mouthed words silently, lips trembling, trying to warn me. Behind her, shadowy figures clawed at the glass, faces twisted in silent screams. I recoiled, stumbling back as the whispers rose to a crescendo. The shadows pressed closer, crowding the edges of my vision until everything blurred. My flashlight flickered once, then died, plunging me into complete darkness. Heart pounding in the void, I fumbled for my lighter. The small flame sputtered to life, casting weak light that barely pushed back the blackness. Then I saw it. A faint glow emanating from the floor. The jagged circle symbol. The mark. It pulsed, beckoning. I had to follow it, even if it meant facing whatever horror lurked at the maze's end. Because the resort didn't just want me to stay, it wanted me to belong. I hesitated, staring at the glowing mark on the floor. The jagged circle pulsed softly, as if alive, beckoning me forward. Despite every instinct screaming at me to turn away, I felt drawn toward it, like a moth to a flame or prey to a predator. The corridor around me was silent except for the faint hum of the symbol's glow. Steeling myself, I stepped onto the mark. The cold bite of the floor seeped through my shoes, sending shivers up my spine. The light flared briefly, illuminating the warped walls and cracked mirrors that lined the passageway. Shadows danced wildly, distorted and monstrous in the flickering glow. Each step forward felt heavier, as though the very air thickened around me. I could hear faint voices, whispers carried on the stale breeze. Some spoke of escape, others begged for release, but none offered hope. I swallowed hard, gripping the flashlight like a lifeline. The corridor twisted sharply, narrowing until I was forced to squeeze through a jagged gap in the wall. On the other side, a large room yawned open, its ceiling lost in darkness, walls covered in faded murals depicting long-forgotten celebrations and horrors. The air was thick with dust and the unmistakable scent of decay. In the center of the room stood an ancient altar, cracked and stained. The mark was carved into its surface, pulsing with the same eerie light. As I approached, the whispers crescendoed into a cacophony of desperate cries and chilling laughter. Suddenly, the temperature plunged and a cold breath brushed my neck. I spun around, heart hammering, but no one was there. The resort was watching, waiting, and I was still trapped within its grasp. The altar loomed before me, its cracked surface glowing faintly with the jagged circle, the mark. Dust swirled in the stale air, settling like ash on the faded murals that twisted grotesquely across the walls. The scent of decay was overpowering, a mix of damp wood, mold, and something far more sinister beneath. I stepped closer, each footfall heavy with dread. My fingers trembled as I traced the carved symbol, feeling a faint vibration beneath the stone, like a heartbeat, slow and steady. Suddenly, the whispering voices erupted around me, overlapping cries of anguish and warning. I pulled back, heart pounding. The air thickened, shadows shifting into twisted shapes that flickered just beyond my vision. One figure stepped forward from the darkness, a man, dressed in a tattered suit, his face obscured by shadow but his eyes glinting coldly. "You shouldn't be here," he said, voice low and chilling. "This place demands sacrifice." I swallowed hard, fear clenching my chest. "What sacrifice?" I asked, voice barely a whisper. He stepped closer, the shadows twisting around him like a cloak. "The resort feeds. It hungers for those who enter, binding their souls to its walls. Only by offering yourself can you escape its grasp." My mind reeled. Was this the man from the photograph? The same black void where his face should be? Before I could respond, the altar pulsed violently. The mark flared, flooding the room with a harsh, blinding light. The whispers turned into screams, deafening and desperate. I stumbled back, shielding my eyes. When the light faded, the man was gone. The altar cracked deeper, the mark glowing fiercely. I realized then that I was no longer a visitor. I was the next offering. The room grew colder, the altar's light dimming but still pulsing with unnatural life. My skin prickled, as if invisible fingers were tracing along my spine. The man's words echoed relentlessly in my mind. The resort feeds, it hungers. The realization sank deeper. I was no longer an intruder, I was prey. I stepped away from the altar, but the shadows clung tighter, creeping up the walls like thick smoke. They whispered my name in cruel, mocking tones, wrapping around me like chains made of darkness. I tried to move, but my feet felt rooted, held fast by the very air. Panic surged. I clawed at the walls, desperate for escape, but the corridor stretched endlessly in every direction. The mark's glow flickered from the floor beneath me, casting long, twisting shadows that writhed and slithered like living things. The whispers grew louder, bleeding into a deafening chorus of voices, some pleading, others screaming, all demanding. Faces appeared in the shadows, twisted, contorted reflections of those who had come before me. Their hollow eyes bore into me with eternal sorrow and rage. A sharp pain shot through my chest, cold and burning, as if icy claws were rending my soul. I gasped, collapsing to my knees, breath ragged. The shadows pulsed with each heartbeat, tightening their grip. Then, from the depths of darkness, a single voice cut through the chaos, calm, commanding, and terrifying. Embrace your fate. I looked up into the void where the man's face should have been, now glowing faintly with that dreadful mark. His presence enveloped me, cold and absolute. I realized then there was no escape. The resort had claimed me, and I was bound forever. Darkness pressed in tighter, swallowing every flicker of light. I lay on cold stone, the altar's pulse thudding through my body like a cruel heartbeat. Shadows swirled around me, thick and suffocating, whispering promise, and threats in a language I couldn't understand. The pain in my chest flared again, icy claws tearing deep, freezing yet burning simultaneously. I struggled to breathe, gasping for air that felt thick and heavy. My hands trembled as I reached toward the altar, the glowing mark pulsing brighter beneath my fingertips. A sudden surge of energy shot through me, blinding and overwhelming. Images flooded my mind, endless corridors twisting and turning, faces of the lost staring blankly, the cold void where the man's eyes should be. I screamed, but no sound escaped. The shadows shifted, coalescing into a towering figure. His presence filled the room, an oppressive force that crushed all hope. The black void where his face should be pulsed with the jagged circle, the mark. You belong to us now, the voice echoed, low and eternal. I tried to resist, fighting the invisible chains tightening around my soul, but the more I struggled, the deeper I sank into the darkness. Suddenly, a faint light flickered within me, a spark of defiance, fragile but real. The whispers faltered, the shadows hesitated. I closed my eyes, focusing on that spark. The cold claws withdrew momentarily, the oppressive weight easing just enough for me to breathe. This was no longer just a prison. It was a battle, my last chance to fight the darkness and reclaim my soul. The resort's hunger was relentless, but so was mine. The spark inside me flickered, fragile but unyielding. Darkness clawed at my mind, trying to snuff it out, but I held on. The cold chains binding my soul twisted and pulled, relentless and cruel, yet I refused to surrender. With trembling hands, I pressed my palms to the altar's glowing mark. A surge of heat blossomed beneath my touch, crackling like fire against the icy grip of shadows. The murmurs grew frantic, voices overlapping in fury and fear. Around me, the walls seemed to pulse, the faded murals bleeding color and life. Faces once trapped in silent agony now twisted in confusion and anger. The shadows recoiled, writhing as if burned by my defiance. The towering figure emerged again, black void pulsing with the jagged circle. His voice boomed, echoing in the chamber. You cannot escape. This place owns you. I met the void where his eyes should be, my resolve hardening. Not yet, I whispered. The altar's light surged, bathing the room in searing white. The shadows screamed, retreating into cracks and crevices. My heart pounded, matching the rhythm of the glowing mark. Suddenly, a hidden door burst open, revealing a narrow passage illuminated by flickering lanterns. The scent of salt and fresh air drifted in, a promise of escape. The figure snarled, a sound like shattering glass, and lunged toward me. I stumbled backward but gripped the altar's edge, drawing strength from the pulsing mark. This was my chance. The resort might own the darkness, but I owned this spark. I took a deep breath and stepped toward the passageway. The fight wasn't over, but for the first time, hope flared. I stepped into the narrow passage, the flickering lanterns casting long, trembling shadows on the crumbling walls. The air smelled fresher here, tinged with salt and something faintly sweet like blooming jasmine. For the first time since entering the resort, I dared to hop. The corridor twisted and turned, narrowing until I had to squeeze through jagged rocks jutting from the walls. Every step felt heavier, as though invisible hands clung to my ankles, trying to pull me back. The mark on the altar pulsed faintly in my mind, a distant heartbeat guiding me forward. Behind me, a low growl echoed, raw and furious. The shadowy figure was coming, relentless as ever. I quickened my pace, heart pounding, breath ragged. The passage opened suddenly into a small cavern. Stalactites dripped water onto a shallow pool that reflected the pale moonlight filtering through cracks above. The cool air kissed my skin, the dampness grounding me in reality. I crouched beside the pool, splashing cold water on my face. The whispering voices had faded, replaced by a heavy silence. But I knew it wouldn't last. A soft scrape echoed behind me. I whipped around, flashlight shaking in my hands. The shadow loomed at the cavern's edge, its black void pulsing with malevolence. It advanced slowly, deliberately. I swallowed hard, knowing the final confrontation was near. My hands tightened around a jagged rock, improvised, but my only weapon. The resort's hunger was still here, waiting to consume me, but I was no longer afraid. I took a steadying breath and faced the darkness. This was my fight for survival. The cavern seemed to hold its breath as the shadow advanced. Its black void pulsed with the jagged mark, eyes empty, yet burning with a cold fury. I gripped the jagged rock tighter, knuckles whitening, every muscle tense and ready. The air thickened, charged with a malevolent energy that made my skin crawl. The scent of decay mixed with the fresh dampness of the cave, creating a nauseating blend. The shadow moved silently, but with purpose, closing the distance like a predator stalking its prey. I forced myself to stand firm, heart hammering in my chest. "I'm not yours," I spat, voice steady despite the fear clawing inside. The shadow hesitated, as if surprised by my defiance. Suddenly, the jagged mark on its chest flared bright red, and it lunged forward with terrifying speed. I barely dodged, the cold rush of air brushing past my face. My rock connected with a sickening thud, but the shadow's form wavered, not breaking. Pain shot through my arm from the impact, but adrenaline pushed me onward. The shadow roared, a sound that shattered the silence like breaking glass, and surged again. I dodged and struck, the dance brutal and desperate. Each blow chipped away at the darkness, but it fought with unyielding fury. The cavern walls trembled, dust cascading down as the battle raged. Finally, with a final, furious cry, the shadow dissolved into swirling smoke. The jagged mark on the floor glowed softly, the oppressive energy lifting. I sank to my knees, breath ragged but victorious. The resort's grip had weakened, but the fight wasn't over. I still had to find a way out. I sank to my knees, chest heaving as the oppressive weight of the resort's darkness momentarily lifted. The cavern was silent now, the lingering scent of decay replaced by damp earth and fresh air. My arm throbbed where I had struck the shadow, but the pain grounded me in the moment, proof I was still alive. The glowing mark on the floor flickered faintly, a soft beacon in the dimness. I pushed myself to my feet, determination filling the cracks left by fear. If I wanted to escape, I had to follow the trail, whatever it was. The narrow passage twisted ahead, promising hope or doom. I moved cautiously, senses on high alert. The walls seemed less hostile, yet shadows clung to every corner, watching. The whispers had faded but lingered like echoes in a deep cavern. The air grew colder as I walked, the temperature dropping sharply. I pulled my jacket tighter, breath visible in short, ragged clouds. Ahead, a faint light shimmered, not the flicker of lanterns or candles, but a pale, ghostly glow emanating from a narrow crack between two stones. I crouched to peer through. Beyond was a small, moss-covered opening leading outside. Fresh air, moonlight, freedom. Relief washed over me, overwhelming and sudden. But then a whisper brushed past my ear, cold and urgent. "You can never leave." My heart clenched. I spun around. No one, just the shadows, watching. I knew the resort's hunger hadn't ended with that shadow's defeat. It was still alive, waiting, hungry for my soul. Summoning every ounce of courage, I stepped through the crack. The cold night air bit my skin, sharp and real. Stars glittered coldly above. But even as I ran toward the woods beyond, the jagged mark pulsed faintly in my mind, a reminder that this nightmare wasn't over. The resort had claimed me, body and soul. The cold night air hit my face as I slipped through the moss-covered opening. Stars glittered overhead, distant and indifferent to my terror. The forest beyond stretched dark and endless, shadows twisting between ancient trees. Every rustle, every snap of a twig made my heart leap. I ran, breath ragged, lungs burning with cold and fear. Branches clawed at my clothes, thorns scraped my skin, but I didn't stop. Behind me, the faint pulsing of the jagged mark echoed in my mind like a warning heartbeat, reminding me the resort's darkness still clung to me. I forced myself to focus on the path ahead, the rustling leaves underfoot, the sharp scent of pine. The woods seemed alive, whispering secrets just beyond comprehension. A cold wind whispered through the branches, carrying a voice. Soft, seductive, sinister. "You can't escape," it breathed. I stumbled into a clearing, moonlight spilling silver onto the grass. Relief flooded me, but it was fleeting. The shadows at the forest's edge stretched and writhed, forming shapes, faces, hands, impossible things that watched and waited. I heard footsteps behind me, slow and deliberate. I whipped around, flashlight barely flickering on. The shadow was there, darker and more twisted than before, its black void eyes burning with hunger. "Come back," it hissed, voice dripping with malice. "You belong to the resort." I swallowed my terror, fists clenched. "Not yet," I growled. I sprinted deeper into the forest, heart pounding like a drum in my ears. The trees closed in, branches snagging at my clothes, roots threatening to trip me. Every step was a battle between hope and despair. The resort's hold on me was weakening, but it wasn't done. The night was far from over. The forest closed around me like a living cage, branches weaving shadows that flickered with every step. My breath came in ragged bursts, the chill of the night seeping deep into my bones. Yet, despite the cold and fear, the woods held secrets, ancient, whispered truths hiding beneath the canopy. As I pushed through thick undergrowth, the scent of pine and damp earth mingled with something older, something almost forgotten, but alive. My flashlight flickered again, but this time the darkness seemed less oppressive, more watchful. I paused by a twisted old tree, its bark scarred with strange symbols, the jagged circle mark. My fingers traced the rough carvings, heart pounding. The forest knew. It was part of the resort's curse, or maybe its prison. Either way, it held a key. A soft rustling came from the shadows. I whipped around, flashlight sweeping. Nothing, just the sway of branches. But the whispers were back, low and urgent, like secrets carried on the wind. "Follow the path," they urged. "Find the light." I nodded to myself, forcing courage to bloom. I moved deeper, stepping carefully over gnarled roots and fallen leaves that crunched beneath my boots. The path narrowed, winding toward a faint glow through the trees. There, in a small clearing, stood an old lantern hanging from a crooked post. Its light flickered steadily, warm and inviting in the cold night. Relief washed over me. This was more than chance. It was a sign, a guide out of the endless nightmare. But as I reached for the lantern, the ground trembled beneath me. From the shadows emerged figures, not quite human, their eyes hollow, their forms shifting like smoke. The resort's reach stretched far beyond its walls. It followed. It hunted. I gripped the lantern tighter, heart pounding. I wasn't safe yet. The figures emerged from the shadows like living smoke, their forms shifting and wavering in the dim lantern light. Their hollow eyes glowed faintly, cold and empty, yet filled with an unmistakable hunger. I froze, heart pounding as they advanced slowly, silently, like phantoms bound to the resort's curse. I tightened my grip on the lantern, its flickering flame the only barrier between me and the creeping darkness. The air grew heavy, thick with the scent of decay and cold earth. Whispers swirled around me, fragmented voices pleading and cursing all at once. One figure stepped closer, its face a blur of shadows and sorrow. A faint voice echoed in my mind, a warning, or perhaps a plea. "Run, before it's too late." I swallowed hard, adrenaline flooding through my veins. There was no time for hesitation. I turned and sprinted back into the trees, branches slashing at my arms and face. The figures followed, gliding effortlessly through the underbrush, their whispers growing louder, desperate. Branches snagged my clothes, roots threatened to trip me, but I pushed forward, lungs burning. The path twisted and turned, a maze of darkness and shadows, but I couldn't stop. Behind me, the figures closed in, their eerie glow flickering like dying stars. Ahead, a faint light pierced the darkness, a promise of safety or another trap I couldn't tell. I surged toward it, feet pounding against the earth, heartbeat thrumming like a drum. As I neared the light, the figure's whispers crescendoed into agonized screams. I reached the edge of a small clearing, breath ragged, trembling with fear and hope. The light came from an ancient door, carved with the jagged circle, the resort's mark. It stood ajar, beckoning. With no other choice, I stepped forward. The nightmare was far from over. The ancient door creaked ominously as I pushed it open, the air thick with dust, and forgot. 10 memories. The jagged circle carved into its weathered wood pulsed faintly, casting eerie shadows on the floor. Stepping inside, I felt the temperature drop sharply, the chill biting through my jacket like icy fingers. The room beyond was vast and empty, lit only by moonlight filtering through shattered windows. Faded tapestries hung from cracked walls, their once vibrant colors dulled by time. The scent of mildew and decay was heavy, mingling with something metallic and sharp. I moved cautiously, footsteps echoing softly. Every creak and groan of the old floorboards made my skin crawl. The jagged circle reappeared on a stone pedestal in the center, glowing with the same cold light that haunted my dreams. As I approached, a low rumble shook the room. Dust fell from the ceiling, and shadows lengthened unnaturally. From the darkness, a figure emerged, the man from the photograph. His face was still obscured, but the black void where his eyes should be burned with that dreadful mark. "You have come far," he said, voice low and hollow. "But this is only the beginning." I swallowed, fear coiling in my stomach. "What do you want from me?" He stepped closer, the shadows clinging to him like a second skin. "Your soul, like all the others. The resort feeds on those who enter, binding them to this place for eternity." A sudden chill swept through me as the altar's glow intensified. The man's form flickered, shifting between shadow and flesh. I realized then that escaping wasn't just about fleeing the resort. It meant confronting the darkness itself. The door slammed shut behind me, sealing my fate. The door slammed shut with a deafening crash, the sound reverberating through the vast chamber. Darkness swallowed the edges of the room, leaving only the pale glow of the jagged circle on the pedestal. The man from the photograph stepped forward, his presence heavy and oppressive, the black void where his eyes should be glowing brighter. "You've come to the heart of the resort's curse," he said, voice like gravel sliding over broken glass. "But there's a choice, a final bargain." My breath caught. What kind of bargain? He smiled, a terrible, twisted thing that sent chills down my spine. "Sacrifice yourself willingly, and the resort will release your soul. You'll leave this place, free, but the hunger will never truly forget you." I shook my head, heart pounding. "And if I refuse?" His smile faded, replaced by a cold, empty gaze. "Then you remain, trapped, a prisoner among the shadows, forever." The room seemed to close in, the air thick with despair and hopelessness. Shadows crept along the walls, whispering names, lost souls calling from the darkness, begging for release. I thought of the faces I'd seen, the ones twisted in torment, the endless maze, the hunger clawing at my soul. The choice felt impossible. But deep inside, a flicker of defiance burned. "I won't be your prisoner," I said, voice steady despite the fear. The man nodded slowly, respect in his cold eyes. "Very well, then you must fight." Suddenly, the jagged circle on the pedestal flared with blinding light. The room shook, walls cracking, dust falling in clouds. Shadows surged forward, an endless tide of darkness intent on dragging me under. I clenched my fists, preparing for the battle to end all battles, the fight for my soul. The resort's hunger was eternal, but so was my will to survive. The room erupted into chaos as shadows surged forward, a living tide of darkness crashing against me. The jagged circle on the pedestal flared with blinding light, illuminating twisted faces and desperate hands reaching from the void. I stood my ground, heart pounding like a war drum, gripping the jagged rock from earlier as my only weapon. The air thickened, charged with malevolent energy that seemed to seep into my bones. Whispers screamed in my ears, voices of the lost and damned crying out for release or revenge. My lungs burned as I lunged forward, swinging the rock at the closest shadow. It evaporated into a cloud of black smoke, but more emerged in its place, relentless and unyielding. I dodged and struck, every move fueled by sheer willpower. The floor trembled beneath me, cracks spiderwebbing out from the altar. as if the very foundation of the resort was breaking apart. The shadows writhed and twisted, their forms shifting between human and nightmare. Suddenly, a searing pain exploded in my side as a shadow clawed through my jacket, fingers like ice digging deep. I gasped, staggering but refusing to fall. With a desperate roar, I swung the rock again, shattering the nearest shadow into a swirl of mist. The jagged circle pulsed faster, syncing with my racing heartbeat. Light and darkness clashed in a furious battle, the room a chaotic storm of shadow and flame. Every moment felt like an eternity as I fought for my very soul. Then, above the chaos, the man from the photograph appeared, his face still shrouded in shadow, but eyes blazing with the cursed mark. He raised a hand, and the shadows recoiled, momentarily silenced. The final battle had begun. The man from the photograph stood before me, his black void eyes burning fiercely with the jagged mark. The shadows retreated to the edges of the room, hissing like wounded beasts. Silence fell like a heavy curtain, broken only by the pounding of my heart. He spoke, voice low and grinding. "If you want to break free, you must face me, the curse's heart." A chill ran down my spine. Why me? Why choose me? He smiled, a twisted, cruel thing. Because you fought, because you resisted, because you have a flicker of light that can shatter the darkness. The room darkened further, the walls closing in like a cage. This is your last chance. Win and be free. Lose and be lost forever. I squared my shoulders, fighting the fear coiling inside. I'm ready. With a gesture, the man summoned a swirling mass of shadows, living darkness that writhed and clawed like a living thing. It surged toward me, cold and suffocating. I raised my makeshift weapon, heart pounding, ready. The battle was brutal. Shadows lashed and struck, but I moved with desperation and grit. Every blow I landed was met with a counter, every step forward met with a pull back. The room shook, the air thick with the scent of smoke and fear. The man watched, eyes blazing with an ancient fury, occasionally striking with blasts of shadow that I barely dodged. The jagged mark on his chest pulsed, a cruel heartbeat sinking with the room's dark energy. I could feel my strength waning, but I pushed harder. The flicker inside me grew into a flame, a fierce, burning hope. I would not become another lost soul trapped in the resort's endless hunger. This fight was for my life and my freedom. Pain radiated through my limbs as the battle raged on, shadows clawing relentlessly, but the flame inside me burned brighter. Every strike I delivered was fueled by pure defiance, a refusal to become another lost soul in the resort's grasp. The man from the photograph advanced, his presence oppressive and overwhelming. The jagged mark on his chest glowed fiercely, pulsing in time with the tortured whispers filling the room. He struck with sudden force, a blast of shadow energy that sent me sprawling across the cracked floor. I gritted my teeth, pushing myself up. The room trembled as the shadows surged, twisting into monstrous shapes with glowing eyes and snarling mouths. The flickering lanterns around the edges of the chamber cast dancing shadows, making it impossible to tell friend from foe. Clutching the jagged rock, I lunged forward, striking at a massive shadow that lunged at me. The creature dissipated into black smoke, but more immediately replaced it. There was no end to their numbers. A deep growl echoed from the darkness as the man's form shifted, becoming more terrifying. His face a swirling void of shadows, eyes like burning coals. His voice echoed with ancient power. You cannot resist forever. But I refused to back down. I focused on the flicker inside, the spark of light that had carried me this far. With a primal yell, I swung the rock with everything I had, breaking through the shadows and striking the man's chest where the mark burned brightest. A searing blast of energy erupted, throwing me back. The shadows convulsed, shrieking as light pierced the darkness. For the first time, I saw cracks forming in the curse's heart. The fight wasn't over, but hope was alive. I lay sprawled on the cracked floor, pain burning through my body, but a spark of hope flickered deep inside me. The blast from my strike had shaken the darkness, sending ripples through the cursed heart of the resort. For the first time, I saw cracks appearing, faint but growing. The man from the photograph recoiled, his shadowed form flickering as if weakened by the blow. The jagged mark on his chest pulsed erratically like a wounded beast fighting to survive. The shadows that had surrounded him shivered and wavered, losing their grip on the room. But he was far from defeated. With a guttural growl, he lunged again, a wave of dark energy surging toward me. I barely dodged, stumbling to my feet. The air was thick with tension, the scent of smoke and decay overwhelming. I could hear the whispers, the desperate pleas of the trapped souls mingling with the curse's furious cries. The resort itself seemed to tremble, as if sensing its grip slipping. My hands trembled, but I gripped the jagged rock tighter. I had to end this. For myself. For the lost. For everyone the resort had claimed. The man advanced, eyes blazing with fury and pain. "You cannot break the curse," he hissed. "It is eternal." "I don't believe you," I said, voice steady despite the fear. "Light breaks darkness." With that, I charged, every ounce of strength pouring into my strike. The rock connected with the glowing mark, sending a shockwave through the room. Cracks spread rapidly across the walls and floor, shards of shadow fracturing into light. The cursed energy screamed, a sound that pierced through my very soul. The resort was breaking, but so was the man. He stumbled back, face flickering between shadow and human, before vanishing in a burst of blinding light. Silence fell. The blinding light faded slowly, leaving me blinking in the dim ruins of the chamber. Silence stretched out like a heavy fog, thick with the scent of dust and broken dreams. The oppressive weight that had gripped the resort seemed to lift, replaced by a fragile stillness. I stumbled forward, heart hammering in my chest, eyes scanning the cracked walls and shattered remnants of the altar. The jagged circle that had haunted my nightmares was now cracked and fading, its power unraveling. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, I breathed freely. But the silence was deceptive. From the shadows, faint whispers began to rise, soft and mournful, the voices of the lost souls trapped by the resort's curse. They swirled around me, fragile and fading, like embers flickering before the final breath. I closed my eyes, listening. "Thank you," I whispered, tears blurring my vision. A sudden cold breeze brushed past, carrying a scent of pine and rain, a promise of renewal. I stepped toward the broken altar, running my fingers over the fractured stone. The light inside me steadied, no longer a flicker, but a steady flame. Yet a nagging doubt lingered. Was the curse truly broken, or was this calm just the eye of a darker storm? As I turned to leave, a faint glow caught my eye, a small shard of the jagged circle, pulsing softly beneath a fallen beam. I hesitated, heart tightening. The resort's hunger had been weakened but not destroyed. I stepped outside, the cold night air filling my lungs. The forest stretched ahead, dark but welcoming. Freedom lay just beyond the trees. But deep inside, I knew this nightmare had left its mark. The resort might be silent now, but its shadow would haunt me forever. And somewhere, in the darkness, something waited. The night air was crisp and cold as I stepped away from the resort's crumbling ruins. The forest embraced me with whispering leaves and the distant hoot of an owl. Freedom felt tangible, yet a weight settled in my chest, an invisible tether pulling at my soul. Despite the fading curse, the memories clung like shadows. Faces of the lost flickered behind my eyes, their silent screams and pleading eyes etched into my mind. The jagged mark's pulse still echoed faintly within me, a reminder that the darkness wasn't fully gone. I wandered deeper into the woods, the crunch of dead leaves beneath my boots the only sound. The scent of pine and earth mixed with something faintly metallic, like blood or rust. A shiver ran down my spine. Suddenly, a voice whispered my name, soft and urgent. I spun around, but only the trees stared back, their branches swaying like ghostly hands. The whisper came again, closer this time, carried on the wind. "You can never leave." I swallowed hard, heart pounding. Was it the resort's lingering curse, or my own fear unraveling? I pressed forward, forcing myself to believe in the dawn ahead. But the forest wasn't just trees and shadows. It was a living memory, a prison for souls lost to the resort's hunger. Somewhere, deep beneath the earth, the curse pulsed weakly, waiting for a chance to rise again. I knew I couldn't escape what I had experienced, not fully. The resort's darkness had become part of me, a scar beneath my skin. As I walked, the moonlight caught a faint glimmer among the roots, a shard of the jagged circle still glowing softly. The nightmare was over, but the haunting echoes would never fade. The shard's soft glow pulsed faintly among the roots, a silent reminder of the resort's lingering darkness. I reached down hesitantly, fingertips brushing its cold surface. A sudden chill raced up my arm, and the whispers returned, distant, but insistent, like a warning from the past. I pulled back, heart pounding. The forest around me felt alive, watching. Every rustle in the underbrush seemed amplified, every shadow deeper. The night held secrets, secrets I was no longer sure I wanted to uncover. Suddenly, a voice echoed through the trees, clear and cold. "You were warned." I spun around, searching for the source, but only the swaying branches greeted me. The air thickened with unease, the scent of pine mixed with something acrid, like burning wood. Memories flashed, faces contorted in terror. The crushing darkness of the resort's corridors, the man with the void where his eyes should be. The jagged mark pulsed in my mind, a heartbeat of malevolence that refused to die. I realized then that the resort's curse was not just a place, but a force, a presence that could follow me beyond the crumbling walls. It wasn't finished with me, it wanted more. I clenched my fists, fighting the cold dread creeping into my soul. I had survived its hunger, but the fight was far from over. The forest whispered around me, voices rising like a chorus. Return or suffer. I swallowed hard, knowing the choice wasn't mine. The resort's shadow would follow me, haunt me, test me endlessly. As the first light of dawn broke through the canopy, I made a silent vow. No matter the cost, I would not let the darkness win. But deep inside, a chilling truth settled. Some nightmares never truly end. Dawn painted the sky in pale pinks and golds, but the light felt fragile, as if the darkness still lingered in the corners of the world. I stood at the edge of the forest, the ruined resort far behind me, but its shadow stretched endlessly in my mind. The jagged mark pulsed faintly beneath my skin, a constant reminder of the curse that had tried to claim me. Though the resort's walls had crumbled and the dark presence shattered, I knew its influence was not truly gone. The whispers haunted my thoughts, echoes of the lost, warnings carried on the wind. Every shadow seemed alive, watching, waiting for a moment of weakness. The forest was no longer just a place. It had become a prison of memories and dread. I tried to shake the fear, to believe I had escaped. But deep down, I felt the pull, the tether tightening. The darkness had marked me, intertwined with my soul in a way I couldn't undo. Nightfall would bring new trials, new shadows to face. The resort's hunger was eternal, its curse relentless. And somewhere, in the depths of the forgotten woods, it waited, patient and hungry. I clenched my fists, resolve hardening like steel. I would not surrender to the darkness. I would fight, carrying the flicker of light within me as a shield. But the fight was far from over. The resort had claimed many before me, and it would claim many after. Its hunger was endless, its shadow eternal. As I walked away, the wind whispered one final warning: you are never truly free. I glanced back once, the ruins swallowed by mist and moonlight. The nightmare was not finished. It was only beginning again. The night was thick with silence as I stood at the forest's edge, staring back at the ruined resort swallowed by mist. The moon cast a pale light over the crumbling walls, the jagged mark faintly glowing like a heartbeat from another world. I had survived, but the price was etched deep into my soul. The whispers returned, not distant echoes, but clear voices threading through the cool night air. They were neither threats nor pleas, but a solemn chorus, a reminder that some darkness never fully fades. The resort's curse had followed me beyond its walls, a shadow that would walk with me forever. I reached up, fingers brushing the faint pulse beneath my skin. The jagged circle's mark was no longer just a symbol, it was a part of me, a scar, invisible but ever present, binding me to the place I had tried to leave behind. Memories surged, endless corridors, cold stone, the man with the void eyes, the crushing hunger of the shadows. I had fought, resisted, and broken the curse's heart, but I could never undo what had been done. The forest stirred behind me, leaves rustling like whispered secrets. I knew the darkness was watching, waiting, patient and eternal. It did not need to hurry. It had all the time in the world. I took a deep breath, stepping forward into the unknown night. Fear was still there, a shadow within my soul, but so was a fierce defiance. I would live with the curse, carry its weight, but I would not let it define me. The resort was gone, but its shadow was endless. And as the first light of dawn began to break, I understood this was not just an ending. It was a beginning. The nightmare had changed me forever. And somewhere, deep in the dark, it waited to begin again.